So, hello everybody. I'd like to warmly welcome you to this session about partnership fundraising, which is hosted by Creative Black Country and part of the Black Country Business Festival. So, we're going to be having some discussions today about working in partnership and partnership funding. Is it the way forward? If so, how do you go about it? And what are the considerations that we need to think about if we're going into partnership fundraising? So the format today is we're going to have a couple of opportunities for discussions in breakout rooms. We're going to look at some 3 case studies and real examples of different partnerships and how you might build a partnership or consortia. Some of us in the room may have been really experienced at working in partnership this way. Others might be new to it, but even if you've done it before, there are different considerations, and it seems that every partnership is different. So I would like to introduce you this morning to my 2 co-hosts. We have Heather Clark. Give us a wave, Heather. And Heather's the manager of strategic project funding in Wolverhampton Council. So she's going to share with us some of her experiences. And we also have Sam Hope, who's Wolverhampton Cultural Compact champion. Give us a wave, Sam. Thank you. And it's great to have your input. So I'm going to ask Heather and Sam to introduce themselves and give us a bit of context as well. Over to you, Heather.
Hi, I'm Heather Clark. I am the Strategic Projects and Funding Manager at the City of Wolverhampton Council. And we recognise the importance of attracting external funding to deliver the city's priorities, and in particular, the Relighting the City strategy, which is our recovery strategy. We're quite a small team, so we tend to get involved in leading bids when they're large strategic partnership bids. However, we're quite happy to work with local partners around signposting and also being a critical friend for smaller scale bids. Wolves really recognises that it's got significant strengths and opportunities around culture, and culture can play a far greater role in sort of the economic growth and the regeneration of the city. It's particularly important in terms of, it will be particularly important in terms of supporting the recovery and developing those vibrant high streets and economic growth. So it's really important to us, and that's why we're very keen to work in partnership with cultural partners.
Thank you. And Sam?
Hi, yes, I'm Sam Hope. Good to see friends in the room and hopefully new friends. I'm a Cultural Compact champion for Wolverhampton. The Cultural Compacts came out of the Cultural Cities Inquiries report in 2019, where there was analysis done on what made successful cities and what made culture and cultural organisations and creative industries sustainable. And from that, there was a recommendation around introducing cultural compacts to cities across England. This intervention has been supported by Arts Council England, and a number of compacts have been set up and are at different stages across England. And also they have a slightly different emphasis depending on the nature of the cities that they represent. In Wolverhampton, we very much have an emphasis on regeneration and economic growth and the importance of culture within that, linked to visitor economy, and obviously linked to jobs and creative tech and technology. We've got a wider cultural stakeholder group, which anybody here who is from Wolverhampton or Black Country, please do get in touch if you want to join. And we also have a steering group and these two groups feed into each other. Also, during lockdown, the West Midlands Cultural Response Unit was set up by Culture Central, and many of you may already be aware of this. I'm on the steering board for that, and also leading a West Midlands Compact Plus network. So that links up the compacts across the West Midlands, but also wider networks, because some towns, etc., don't necessarily qualify for the compact, but they already have networks in place. And so this wider group is looking at opportunities that might arise, particularly within cultural and creative industries funding, and linking into bodies such as West Midlands Combined Authority and also local LEPs.
Thank you, Sam. We've got a question in the chat from Adrienne about getting involved, and we're going to share Sam's email at the end, so we'll come to that. And I just wanted to introduce the funding network. I can see we have a few people who've joined us on the previous two sessions, so it's great to have you back along, but also lots of new people as well, new faces and new friends. So the Black Country Funding Network for Arts and Culture has recently been set up. It's hosted by Creative Black Country. We had a small amount of funding from the Arts Fundraising and Philanthropy scheme for virtual networks during this kind of strange time that we find ourselves in. And we've had two sessions already, just looking at what's happening now, the current situation, and how we might be thinking about the future. And I can send out the links for those sessions if you want to have a look. There's a recording, and also the slides are available to anybody who couldn't join. And the role of the network really is to join up and connect people who are working in the Black Country or living in the Black Country, and they have ideas. They're either a creative organisation, they're artists, or they have some creative activity as part of their services. And it's just really to have a coordinated approach to funding and fundraising, so that we can try and avoid duplication. So we're not competing for funds. Actually, is it better if we work together? So we're trying to encourage collaboration. Also lose some of the secrecy around fundraising and the competitiveness, because we want to just bring in more money to the region, really. And to grow ideas and connections, put people together, because even though it's quite a geographical spread, we're Sandwell, Walsall, Dudley and Wolverhampton, and it might be quite a small area, but it's also quite a large area, and you might not be aware of all the groups and different artists that are working. And we do have, it's just such a creative region. So there's lots and lots of people to put you in touch with. So that's a little kind of introduction and context from our point of view. So I'm just going to share my screen again and just talk about partnerships. So these are the people who are contributing today, me, Heather and Sam, and we will have email details at the end. So just wanted to talk a little bit before we started about partnership and what it means, and I found this little definition, which is partnership working refers to a broad range of actions and can easily be defined as two or more groups coming together to achieve a common purpose. It's not necessarily a 50-50 division of power or financial responsibility, but there's always some degree of spreading control or influence. I thought that was quite an interesting thing just to think about as well, about the different types of partnerships, and that it might not be 50-50, you know, you might be a small partner or you might be a lead partner, and that the spreading of control and influence is a different way of thinking. So it's not just you, it's how do you share, and what does that mean when you are spreading that control and influence. And then what kind of partnerships, how do we define a successful partnership? I mean, are these guys a successful partnership? They've been going for, you know, quite a while. They seem pretty successful to me. And the guys from the north, probably lasting longer than, you know, most marriages. And then there's also surprising partnerships, aren't there, that you don't imagine things to go together very well. And this example from nature I just really liked. It's an Egyptian crocodile and a plover bird. And you would think that the bird would be slightly brave to put itself into the crocodile's mouth, but the bird picks out all the little bits of food from the crocodile's teeth. So it's a partnership of mutual benefit. The plover bird gets the food and the crocodile gets his teeth cleaned. So surprising, sometimes you don't imagine things to go together and work in a partnership, but actually they do. So we're going to do our first kind of discussion group. We're going to split you into breakout groups. One of us, so either myself, Sam, Heather or Rosalind, will be with you in your group. And we'd love it if from the discussions, if somebody else from the group reports back, just so that we're hearing different voices and opinions today. So we're just looking first of all at the hallmarks of a good partnership. What are they, do we consider? And what could you or your organisation bring to a partnership? So when you're thinking about yourself, are you a venue that's looking for performers? Are you an art or craft maker that's looking for a space to exhibit? Are you something really niche that you can bring that other people might not have? So if Rosalind, you can work your magic and put us into breakout rooms, we'll have that discussion and then we'll feedback in a moment. Who was group one? I can't remember, is it Sam or Heather's group?
Heather.
So Heather, do you or the person, your representative? You're on mute, Heather.
Yeah, Ian was going to feed back on behalf of the group.
I got to feed back. Yes, I'm feeding back. Here I am. Hello. We came to the conclusion that one of the most important things was clear communication, working in partnerships. Also, space to play was important for us, and creating something that's bigger than the sum of its parts. That's the phrase I was trying to get to in the conversation we had. Bigger than the sum of its parts. Also, Terry mentioned, I think, having clearly defined objectives and creating something in which both parties benefit. Is that a fair appraisal of what we said, Heather and everybody else? Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, brilliant. Brilliant. Who was breakout room 2? Is that Sam?
Yes, that's me. Yes, it's funny, we came to the same conclusion with regards to the some of the parts being, you know, greater. Zoe is going to talk on our behalf.
Hello. So yeah, very much building on what Ian was saying about getting something, as you both just said, bigger than the sum of its parts. But we also talked about the importance of having different perspectives and how useful it is to make sure that you have other people to kind of bring to what you've been doing. And within that, how important it is to identify skills really early on, to make sure that you're having those conversations, to make sure that you're including people that do come from different backgrounds and will be able to bring different opinions to the table. We talked about how, or Neil specifically talks about underutilized people. So people, for example, on box office or in front of house that may have skills that aren't being utilized, and the importance of having really deep conversations with effective listening, I think as Balvir put it, to ensure that you have truly identified what's on offer and what it is that you have to work with, and to set things up from that foundation very early on.
Great, thank you, Zoe. Was your group number 3, Rosalind?
It was. I'm afraid I had to pop out of the room, so I'm not sure who note took in the end for room 3. But if you'd be happy to share your thoughts, please.
It was me.
It was Thomas.
So again, it's people have kind of, there's a Venn diagram in terms of people saying what we've kind of come to, but in terms of things that haven't been highlighted, what are the good hallmarks of a partnership is ensuring that the partnership is future-proofed. So that idea of once a project or an initial project with people involved is created, that the ability to come back to those people once more for recurring projects, recurring work's really important. I made the point that I think the construction industry has parallels in that respect with the creative industry, in the sense that, you know, one of my things is, you know, you should always know a good builder, you should always know a good plasterer, you should always know a good plumber. It's that, you know, all those people with all the skills you can rely on. And once you've known that, that is future proofing. And I think the idea of clarity of communication from the outset as well. I think if you're going to be holding things back for whatever individual reasons, that doesn't lean towards the hallmark of a good partnership. You've got to have that clarity of communication in there.
Great, thank you, Thomas. And Trevelyan's going to feedback from group 4. Thank you.
Hello. So we talked a bit about each partner being transparent about what the expectations were, and being honest about those things up front. That partnerships need to be based in a real need to do something that perhaps chimes with that bigger than the sum of its parts, rather than just it would be nice to partner with someone. You know, there's got to be a task that the partnership is engaged in beyond itself. We talked a bit about how partnerships can sometimes become too complex and unwieldy. So they need to be fleet of foot and able to respond to changes and developments in the work. I think most of our other points have probably already been covered.
Yes, thank you, Trevelyan. We talked about that authentic nature of partnerships and how actually you can't kind of shoehorn something. It doesn't tend to work as well. It needs to be authentic. There was already, I don't know if it happened in the other breakout rooms, but already people kind of connecting, or you can see how that connection can happen. And oh yes, we must chat afterwards. So so I hope that's happening for you guys in your rooms as well. So thank you very much for your input onto that. And if we want to kind of, we're kind of almost halfway through, we're just going to do some little case studies. So we're just going to take, if you want to do like a 2-minute comfort break, and then come back. Is that okay with everybody? So what we're going to do now is just have a little kind of 5 minutes each, like example case studies, real examples of either current or recent partnership projects that are taking place. So I'm going to kick that off actually. So I'm just going to get up my slide and start with some really good news. Can everybody, I hope everyone can see that. So I'm just going to talk a little bit about our Shine a Light project, which we have just, when I say we, CBC and some other partners have won an award for £200,000 for the next 3 years. And it's a collaboration between Spirit of 2012 and Birmingham 2022 to get the right dates there. So it's Creative Black Country, and we're working with the deaf, some deaf community partners and some other artistic partners as well. There are Deafscope, Deaf Explorer, Dash, which is disability consult, are going to act as our disability consultants, and Black Country Touring as well. And the Shine a Light is a working title because we're hoping to shine a light on the Black Country during the Commonwealth Games and the 2022 cultural programme. And it's a performance and film project, like I said, with deaf, disabled and non-disabled groups. And this came about through the way that Creative Black Country works. So it started from a seed idea. So we've been working with some deaf artists, and they were talking about, it'd be lovely to do a project where we kind of try and build bridges between the deaf and the hearing world, and you know, work together creatively, but we didn't have any money. So along came the Spirit of 2012, which is, it's a legacy funder from the Olympics, and they announced the West Midlands Challenge Fund in collaboration with Birmingham 2022. I don't know whether anybody else looked at this fund, but when we looked at this fund, it was called the Challenge Fund because it was quite a challenge to apply in time. You needed to work to have a creative partner, you needed to work with disabled partners, you needed to link with the Commonwealth theme, create work that coincided with the cultural festival in 2022, and yet very tight turnaround to get your expression of interest in. So that was the challenge. Plus the funder is quite a specific funder. They're an outcomes funder. They're looking for certain outcomes as part of the fund. So it was quite a challenge to get it all together in the short time frame. But the advantage that we did have is that we already had those partnerships and that link at that grassroots level. So we had the ideas and we had the relationships, so it seemed doable. So we kind of built it from the ground up, and we looked at what else other partners we might need in order to be able to deliver. We did our expression of interest. We got through to the second round and went into lockdown. So we were put on Zoom which was also quite a challenge. We then had our deaf partners and interpreters, and all of us, we all had to go through that stage, didn't we, of learning all this new technology, and this is the new way we're going to work with interpreters. And yes, so that was, so that just, it made the process also a little bit more complex. But we kept the communication going. We kept it going, because we were communicating with different, you know, there was almost a language barrier, because the deaf, some of our deaf partners are BSL signers, so that we found that some of the written communication sometimes was lost a little bit, so we really had to reinforce that and have these kind of live face-to-face talks as much as we could. We developed an accessible consultation tool because we had to demonstrate demand for the project. So we had to build on that. the funders were very supportive because the application process was quite complex. So we were assigned a person from the funder, which was really nice, so that we could ask questions. We could go, what do you mean by that? What do you want by that? Could we, you know, is this what you're looking for? They couldn't comment on the content of the application, but they could say, we could say, actually, does this budget, you know, does that make sense to you? Is this the kind of thing you're looking for? So that was really helpful, because it was quite a beast of an application. It went off with 12 supporting documents and reports on top of the actual application. So we were successful at second stage, which is brilliant. So one of 3 organisations, where the other organisations is Coldfield, working with children and young people, and Warwick Arts Centre. So I think it was quite a competitive fund. So previous to this meeting, we've just had our first partner meeting since finding out we've got the funding. So now the work really starts as well. But in terms of our learning, it was definitely about time, and allowing that time and having that patience to work with all the different partners and wait for, once you put out for some information, you need to wait for that to come back in order to get the application kind of built. You need to share it, you need to wait for comments, then you have to amend. We set our own deadline ahead of the deadline, but this is something that I always do. It was a Monday deadline, and I did not want to be working through the weekend, so I set myself a Friday deadline, and we were like, we will have, you know, it also just gives you time to, if anything does go wrong, but we sent it in on the Friday. Yeah, absolutely what we were saying before about communication being key. We had to set up a partnership agreement for the funders. We had to send a draft one off with the application. And that, I think these are really important, and also need to be kind of set out from the start. The partnership agreements kind of set out the essence of this is, you know, this is the kind of culture that we want to, this is how we want to work together, and everyone needs to sign up to that. And then we also have like individual kind of contracts or individual agreements with all the different partners. That is the nitty gritty. This is what you will deliver, when, and for how much. So that was like done in a more individual, and that's actually being able to being done now. But if you want to, if you're interested and you kind of need a partnership agreement, there are templates that you can use, and also wherever you're based in the Black Country, you have a council of voluntary service. And if you get in contact with them, and you can do that through me, or you might have direct contact already, but they also should have templates and be able to help you with that kind of thing if that's what you need. The budget, the other thing is that just something to bear in mind. We were the lead, CVC was the lead organisation. However, we are not getting the £200,000. The £200,000 is going out to all our partners. It's coming in and going out. And in fact, we'd still need to fundraise for a later part, for the actual performance part. And it's just being aware of how much time it takes, making sure you put in your time for the work that you're going to do on developing the application and then managing it when it comes through. And I think sometimes that gets lost. So just something to think about. But I'm hoping that this is the kind of project that and seed thoughts that we can do through the funding network. This would be a kind of example of how we can work. Because if we can connect and we have those friends, have those people that we know do all those different roles and can add different elements to a partnership, then when the tight deadlines come through, you're kind of already starting on the journey. You're not trying to get it together all at the last minute, and that really helped us. I don't think that we could have been successful with this if we didn't already have those kind of seed ideas. So that is just something that I would take away from that. So I hope that's slightly helpful. I'm going to pass over to Sam now, who's going to talk to us. So and then to Heather, and then we'll have some discussions if that's okay. Just going to set up the slides for you, Sam.
Well, thank you, Yvonne. Great, looks like we've got it. Thanks very much, Yvonne, for that. I agree with a lot of what Yvonne has already been saying about the partnership working in the way that she's gone about it with regards to their recent win, which is fantastic news for Wolverhampton and Black Country. Before taking on the role of Cultural Compact Champion, I was Associate Dean at University of Wolverhampton, and I was asked today to talk a little bit about international perspectives of project working. And I'm taking, for my case study, a suite of projects that fall under the banner of Sign Media. I first won a Sign Media project in 2009 and was principal investigator of that project. And this was an Erasmus Leonardo project at the time, which has since moved now to Erasmus Plus Strategic Partnerships. And the purpose of the Erasmus funding is very much around collaborations with impact towards knowledge exchange, vocational skills and training. The consortium was set up across Europe with partners, and the project was about it was a creative industries project, and it was around developing online resources for deaf media professionals. Through our research, we found that a lot of the feedback we were getting was that there were glossaries, etc., available, but not with a specific vocation or profession in mind. So we set about developing this, and also there were barriers around production paperwork, as Yvonne touched on, that sign language users it's a very different grammatical structure and therefore can often struggle with written text. So again, the work was based around that sort of production paperwork. So there was a need, which I think was something that Trevelyan touched on earlier from his group. There was a definite need. The consortia consisted of a higher education provider, which was University of Wolverhampton, but also in Austria as well. There were charities and businesses also involved. And as the project grew, because it became a suite of projects, we expanded. So we built on that core consortia and then expanded to include other countries. As you know, Yvonne said, it takes a lot of time, or it can take a lot of time to build a consortia, particularly in those first instances. So, you know, if you are able to build beyond the project, then a lot of that groundwork is done, and it's so much easier then to bring in new partners. So the actual project itself, the initial project, it delivered a very innovative program, a game-based activity. and as I said, designed around deaf media professionals across Europe. So Yvonne, if you'd like to switch the slide, please. So yeah, what was interesting about these projects, it was that combination, that range of stakeholders, which did involve deaf and hearing participants. And as Yvonne was saying about their project, obviously that needs to take into consideration those different languages. And in our case, you know, we had the different native languages spoken, but also the different native sign languages, because each country has a different language, and so that can make it quite complex. So you know, it's literally in the case of this particular project, but also in general, take into account if you're working across sector, for example, that the you know languages used can be very different. So it's taking that into consideration as you're building your consortia. What was really good as well is to have commercial partners involved, and I think again that can bring a different perspective. So that worked really well. Those local links into your communities, but also maximising the impact and working with, for example, in Wolverhampton, we've got DeafFest International Film Festival, but we were also involved in festivals in Europe as well. The emphasis on skills and training, the social and economic benefits, it's really important to talk about those within your applications, the wider impact. And I think what was really great about these particular projects was that there was a snowball effect, that, you know, one project led to another because of user feedback and more needs that were identified, and therefore there were other opportunities to create really great innovative work. Technological changes, that was another thing that again moved the projects on. So, you know, we went from the original Sign Media to a Sign Media Smart, which was a glossary using mobile technologies so that people could use it on location, they could use it in pre-production, post-production, and then expanding that into a blended approach, so training and those opportunities, and then into a different area, because obviously with creative industries, a lot of people are either micro or small businesses, and so it was that expertise then for Sign Media Enterprise, which is around you know, how you go about setting up and running your business. So we were able to build on the expertise of the consortium, and it created this multiplier effect. And as I said, you know, the technological developments also, you know, moved the project along. I was asked to go and advise at the EU Parliament in Brussels around platforms for democracy and voting opportunities for deaf people, and we're also nominated for the Media in Education Awards, which is a prestigious award ceremony in Europe. If you'd like to move on, please, Yvonne. Yvonne, can you change the slide, please? Right, lovely, thank you. So yeah, I'd just like to touch on a few tips really around taking the lead, because the university was lead organisation and has been now. The most recent projects have only just finished this year, and it's quite a responsibility, obviously, taking on the lead. As Yvonne was saying, it's great if you can set up those relationships even before the funding comes along. I mean, that's the ideal, is to have friendship before funding, but that's not always possible. We know that, and you know, sometimes you have to bring people in because you're missing that bit of expertise. But hopefully through your networks or through your partners' networks, you can find those people. I mean, we had one really great partner who was originally subcontracted to one of the projects, who then became a partner. So, you know, there's ways of finding partners as you go through the projects. And as we were talking about earlier, you know, what is it that you can bring to the party? You know, who's bringing what and what's missing. You know, there has to be you know, a need for those people to be in the partnership, and that's really, you know, really important. But we also, in our group earlier, we talked about those other skills that might not be your actual practice, that you might also be able to bring. So example, or, you know, marketing or social media skills for, you know, for dissemination and those other activities that you have to do on the project. So, you know, bear that in mind as well. That's something else that you could bring to the table. Cooperation, obviously we spoke a lot about this in the groups, didn't we? That two-way development and building on people's strengths, that's really key. And that communication, you know, clearly set out partners' responsibilities, and structure, clear structure of the project, whether that's working in work packages, you know, allocated days, you know, where your Gantt chart, where you expect to hit certain milestones for those particular strands of work. You know, those things will change, but at least you can monitor where things are and pull things back. Allow time for piloting and audience user testing where you can, because that's really, really critical. I mentioned about language and the cultural differences. Obviously, in the project I've just spoken about, that was very literal. But you know, if you're a cultural organisation and you're talking to you know, an engineering business, then you're going to have very different approaches to things. So it's just thinking about those cultures and the kinds of language when you're dealing with those, you know, those different maybe industrial sectors, but also cultural differences when you're working with different communities. It's you know, it's making sure that you're sensitive and open to that. And also people are at different stages, not, you know, some partners really need nurturing. They may not have worked in this way before. And sometimes, you know, you have to pick up the pieces that if they aren't fulfilling what they've been asked to fulfill. And if you've had, you know, those very open conversations and very transparent relationships, sometimes you have to, as lead, have difficult conversations. But those difficult conversations are so much easier if you've had those relationships, because the trust is there, and if people trust, then they're, you know, then you can have those difficult open conversations. Be flexible. You know, things do change in projects; they always do. The creative problem solving is really key, but within the consortium, don't, you know, as lead, you know, it's not about trying to solve all those problems yourself. It's working with your team, with your consortium, to solve those problems in the best possible way. And sometimes, you know, some of those responsibilities may need to change, and you know, you might need to move a few of the pieces of the jigsaw puzzle around. But you know, nothing is unsurmountable, and you can always solve these problems, and together that's always easier. Avoiding the project creep. I think, you know, obviously having those clear objectives really help you to do that. So just keep bringing people back to the deliverables. But you know, it's fine to have those conversations and get excited about another idea, because that other idea might be that you bank that and you save it for another project. You know, on your project, you don't have to do it all at once. You know, there's an opportunity to do it later, come back together and build and use that snowball effect. But with the project that you're working on at the time, keep coming back to the deliverables, and that will help you to avoid the project creep. And I think what's essential, absolutely, is a good sense of humour. You know, I think consortia projects can be up and down. You know, they can have their difficulties. But I think, you know, if you've got a good sense of humour and you approach it in that way, you know, and you have fun working together and getting the job done, it can be serious work that you're doing, but there's never any harm in having fun doing it. And so thanks very much. If you want to know a little bit more about the SIME media projects, as I said, these are based at the University of Wolverhampton, and if anybody wants to know more, I'm more than happy to pass you on to the team there that are continuing to do a great job. So but that's the website there for you to have a look at. And also I should just mention very briefly, Yvonne, about British Art Show 9. That's a fabulous event that's coming to Wolverhampton in 2021. And there is an opportunity to find out more about that next week on the 13th of October. And please do sign up to that. Again, it's with the Black Country Business Festival. Thanks very much.
Thanks, Sam. And yes, I hope we'll share, if you can just let me know about the link for that, I'll share that with everybody after the session. Thank you so much. And now we're going to Heather. And I had a little time recce, and we are going a little bit behind time, and I don't know whether that was me chatting too much. But anyway, we'll carry on with Heather. Thank you.
Okay, I'll try and be very quick so we still have some time for the breakout area. So my case study was Cultural Development Fund round 1. Now, this is a weird one because we weren't actually successful. We were recommended for funding, but unfortunately the minister had the final judgment. And so we weren't put into the final few that got the funding. But I think what comes out of it for me was sort of building those relationships with the project partners around project pipeline. So that's basically what I wanted to just quickly go through. So basically in 2018, the city submitted a cultural development fund. We called it Animate Wolves. And it was all around driving culturally led economic growth, maximising impact of arts and culture in revitalising the city. Now, it was very much a place-based approach, so it was focusing on the place, but it brought in all different elements of culture, physical venues, events, skills development, creative businesses. So it really tried to pick up all the different areas, and it was aiming to use culture to kickstart regeneration, really boost the culture offer, link key areas and change perceptions of the city. So if you just move on to the next slide. Okay, I think what really worked for me is the partnership. We brought together a range of partners. This included cultural partners, many of which are on the call, but also non-cultural sectors. And each of them brought in particular areas of speciality, knowledge and added value. So for example, Trevelyan very much led on sort of the cultural leadership element of the bid. The support from the non-cultural partners was fantastic. Benson Elliott, who owned the Manda Centre in Wolverhampton, they offered space for both events, but also creative workspace. It was a place-based approach. I had a particular focus on the city centre, and this meant we could maximise the impact and cover that whole range of cultural activities in one bid. And that very much the focus, we started our bid with this will create this amount of economic benefit, so it very much focused on that, but it also built on existing regeneration plans. So there was a city realm scheme which was known as West Side Link, but that created the basis of what we called Event City. Part of the bid was to build capacity through investing in events infrastructure, which would have helped all partners put on events in the city. And it also supported improvements, developments of existing cultural assets and looked at that, embedding that talent development to support the whole vision. So if you can move over to the next slide. Despite the fact that the bid itself wasn't funded in the end, to me, I think it was a real success, because what it showed was it showed our commitment to culture, and since then the Arts Council are very committed to support activities within Wolverhampton, including the funding for the Cultural Compact. Unfortunately, pre-COVID, there was a strong encouragement to go for Cultural Development Fund round 2, which unfortunately has been superseded by sort of COVID and emergency works. It also demonstrated that role culture can play in economic growth and regeneration. So that's the core to our Cultural Compact aim, but also very much included in our broader funding asks. So recently, culture's been part of the Future High Street ask, which is about 23 million, I think, and also the Towns Fund ask, which is 48 million. So a lot of the elements of that are now being built into other bids. So what we've got this strong project pipeline to meet future needs and opportunities and reform asks. The partnership itself has formed the basis of the Cultural Compact work that Sam is leading on, but we've also had a couple of successes, I think. So the office I mentioned that Benson Elliott offered for Creative Workspace, Eagle Works have actually been able to, we've actually managed to make that arrangement with Eagle Works, who were going to be made homeless in the city. And so we've retained all those artists in the city. We've got a empty building now being reused for Creative Workspaces. And I think that's really positive. And also the Event City element has remained a priority, and there's a Towns Fund funding request for an events programme. And part of that funding request is also for infrastructure that partners can use to put on events in the city, which would make things a lot easier for partners to put on events. So I went through that very quickly to give us a chance for the breakout. So it's back to Yvonne.
Thank you so much. And just a note there about, you know, even when you've done the work and you think, oh, that was all for nothing, but actually it wasn't, you still keep those, you can keep it going, and so that's really brilliant. So our next discussions we'll put it into one question, I think, because we're in this kind of strange time. Just a little bit about how have you been developing partnerships during this kind of strange time that we find ourselves in, and are there any tips? So again, we're going to go into the breakout rooms, Rosalind, if that's okay. Hello everybody, are we all back?
Should be.
Yeah, I hope you got on okay with that. Just doing a really quick sum of this before we go on. So we basically summed up that it's been a bit crap for the last few months, but we've gone through like 3 stages: crisis mode, cautious optimism, and then back to, we feel like we're going back into reverse, and everyone's having to do that 6-month kind of like readjustment that things might, you know, we're going to be in this for the long term. On the upside, we also talked about the gifts that lockdown has given us. For example, Adrian mentioned the Culture Central Zoom meetings, and having that, how the sector actually has become more open. And now you can find yourself in a room with people who you couldn't normally get to speak to or see because their diaries are so full. So it's almost had some kind of like equalizing, because it doesn't matter who you were or, you know, how big you were, how much money you had, everybody's kind of like had to go through the same process. So that was our little conversation, but ended up saying it's a bit crap. So Heather, do you want to feedback?
Yeah, very quickly, I think there was a couple with mixed experience. One person found out that initially when everything went online, meeting overload, and then it all got slow. but two other people reported that actually what's happened is quite positive. They've found new partners. They're working very closely with smaller community organisations, charities. Others reported that actually it meant they could concentrate more on doing the cultural activities. And there was some challenge in terms of some of the organisations that we would normally deal with actually refocusing their efforts on COVID, so they weren't so easy to reach during this time.
Yeah, sorry, we also had that one of our participants lost their partner because they closed down and were all furloughed. So yeah, that has been another consequence. So yes, thank you for that. Sam?
Yes, very quickly, obviously touched upon elements of what you've both spoken about, but we also had Arena in our group, and obviously if there's a venue, then the concentration has been very much on keeping that venue afloat, and just maintaining partnerships rather than looking for new partnerships. And also another part was able to access the emergency funding, and has been able to carry on doing creative work and work with a number of creative practitioners around work around heritage canals, and particularly women's role within that. So I think there have been some opportunities opened up, as well as, yeah, I think with regards to the partnership it's working in different ways, isn't it? It's working in these ways virtually, and also it's maximising those networks, I think, at the moment, such as the WM crew.
Thank you. And Rosalind, your group?
Tom was going to speak on behalf of our group, if that's all right.
Yeah, so sorry, I keep needing to look at the question. In terms of the developing the partnerships, it's been touched on again. It's that looking inwards to strengthen the existing relationships and being more trustworthy in the people that you slowly bring in. And again, that leads back to that idea of future proofing, because to put it in a context in terms of pandemic, it's that case of, you've been through it together, you're going to trust the people that you're with. And that's not to say that you're not going to trust new people, but things like this, it will build character. It will definitely build character in terms of mental and physical resilience. I also said, in terms of, again, it's because of what I do in terms of the medium and the format. It's that ingenuity to expand the horizons remotely. So I think I've got a list of about 8 or 9 different arts organisation websites and job commissions and vacancies in terms of what you look for. There will be some overlap in terms of where's posted and what's posted, but it's that ability to look out from your area but still maintain the fact that, yes, we are West Midlands based artists, but we have worked further afield. And I think that's really important for establishing oneself, or a company's self, within the region. So for example, I said I had a commission from an arts centre in Hexham, which is Newcastle way, for a day's work, and that was for a video piece for an online gallery. But it's that fact that, I'm not Hexham based, but it's that I am a West Midlands based creative and I have worked in this area.
Great. Thank you. Yeah, and obviously it doesn't matter, the geographic spread has also meant that you can kind of join in meetings that are and work, because we're all working remotely. You can be anywhere, can't you?
Yeah.
Okay, so we've run over time, of course we have. There's lots to say. I just want to the link for the British Art Show session next week is in the chat, but I will share it afterwards. So there's other opportunities coming up, obviously, for us, in the future. Long term, these things don't happen overnight, but we've got the British Art Show coming up. We have, in our region, we've got the Commonwealth Games. There's also an opportunity around the British Festival 2022, and I know Sam's involved in something, but I don't know whether we've got time to talk about that or whether we can do that in the chat afterwards, but I don't know whether anybody else is thinking of applying, because that is another complex application process. If anyone here, or if you know anybody who's a first or second time applicant or thinking of applying to the Arts Council under the project grants, we also have some sessions, some one-to-one sessions. If anybody's interested, then do let us know. Just email me and I'll pass you on to Rosalind. Rosalind's organising those. There's a few sessions left, which is obviously really good opportunity to get 20 minutes with face-to-face with an Arts Council advisor. Future sessions, we're going to have Rachel Magson from Birmingham 2022 coming to talk to us, and hopefully by the time she does come to talk to us, there might be some information about future, you know, the programming and the commissioning of that programme. And also the National Lottery, who are advocates of partnership working as well. We're going to have a speaker talking to us about applying to the National Lottery. So I just wanted to leave you guys with this, with a quote that I found really interesting. So if you want to go faster, go alone. If you want to go further, go together. And I think that's quite poignant, especially for some of the things we've been talking about today. Those are their email addresses are on the screen if anybody wants to get in touch. But also I will email everybody afterwards and kind of and share all this as well. So but do feel free at any time to get in touch. And if you can also, I think Rosalind in the chat has put a link to the survey. Obviously for our funders, we need to feed back to them. So if you found it useful, then that's great. Please let us know. Or if there's things that we can do to improve, because we're all working through this. You know, we know that actually in person this would kind of have a totally different vibe. So we're trying to, you know, we're all trying to work through it together. So any feedback's really helpful. If people have to go, then please dash off, and thank you so much for your input. Thank you so much to Heather and to Sam for your input today. Thank you so much, and to Rosalind. But if anybody does want to stay just to have a little chat, to ask a question, or to say who was that person that was from wherever, you know, or have an idea, then, you know, we're just going to stay for about 5 minutes. So so yeah, but if not, thank you so much for your time. But if, as I say, I'm here if there's any questions or chats that anybody wants to have.
Thanks, Yvonne.
Just
I have to go, another meeting, but thanks everyone. Nice to meet you. Bye.
Thank you,
Yes, thank you,
Heather.
Rachel. Lovely to meet you. Do get in touch. That was great. Thanks a lot. Bye.
Yeah, thank you guys.